If two countries fight 3 wars against each other, and those wars are completely unrelated, then they should not be classified as the same war, but multiple wars. Should be common sense, but apparently not. If you look up the list of longest wars in history, then you get stuff like the Anglo-French Wars, which is apparently one war, but it's actually just the word for every single war fought between France and England, despite the fact that most of those wars are unrelated and had years or decades between them. And for every single war on the list of longest wars in history, it's the same thing. They've just gone, oh, every war between these two countries is classified as one war, and it spans hundreds of years, despite the actual wars only lasting a couple of decades at most. Most people think the longest war in history is the Reconquista, but in the Reconquista, fighting was so inconsistent that it was realistically several wars rather than one. And it gets worse. Apparently the Punic Wars lasted 2,000 years, because after the Third Punic War, they forgot to sign a peace treaty until modern-day Carthage and Rome signed a peace treaty in the 20th century. But that's just stupid, because a city that's been reduced to rubble cannot sign a peace treaty, and I feel like once Carthage has literally been reduced to nothing but memories, well, at that point, it's obvious that the war is over. And under that logic, there's probably so many wars that are still going on because they forgot to sign a peace treaty, because the entire capital city got reduced to rubble. The Punic Wars did not last 2,000 years, they lasted 118 years, and they were 3 separate wars. I've come to realise that none of the wars on the list of the longest wars in history actually count as a war, due to the fact that there were years, sometimes decades-long gaps in the fighting, and because the people at the time definitely considered them multiple wars. So what was the longest war in history that was one constant war with no major breaks in the fighting? The answer is the Russo-Circassian War, which was when Russia spent 101 years trying to subdue the Circassian people and annex their country, which they did in 1864. So even though most people agree that the longest war in history is the 781-year Reconquista, and some would argue the Third Punic War lasted 2,000 years, I would say that the longest war that actually qualifies as a war is the Russo-Circassian War. Now, if you watched this video, then you're probably the kind of person to watch a video about the battle with the highest death toll in history. Luckily, I've got that right here for you to click